In animation, a dozen concentric bands in various colors and textures swirl behind the words Ability Summit. Ioana
Hello and welcome.
Tanase.
I'm Ioana, and I'm an AI and Accessibility Program Manager at Microsoft. If you're here, it means that, like us, you're excited or maybe intrigued about the potential of AI systems, especially given the unique opportunity that they hold for people with disabilities. As technology makers, you know the importance of building systems that are not only accessible, but also representative of the human identity. However, that in itself is not enough. Even the best tools in the world will absolutely gather dust on a shelf if we don't provide learning resources and help people develop new skills. Today, we'll hear from Olga, who will introduce us to the topic of trustworthy AI and share how we can build AI tools in a responsible manner. True, we'll share how at AvePoint they leverage Copilot Studio to develop different personas for their internal AI system and build tools that empower all their workforce. And finally, Kili will share practical ways and resources for people with disabilities to leverage AI technology and build skills that could be a differentiator in the workplace and more. Olga, as an AI expert in this field, can you please tell us more about the concepts and also what are practical ways we can incorporate them?
Olga Dutova,
absolutely.
Fairfax.
Hi, my name is Olga. I'm a Senior Program Manager for Responsible AI at Microsoft. And as Ioana said, my role is to work with Microsoft product and research teams to help them to build more safe and accessible generative AI systems or models. We all know that AI is today already changing paradigms for people with all abilities, and it helps to bridge the technology divide. It can make the technology way more inclusive and accessible for people with disabilities. So just a couple of examples you may be already familiar with. Microsoft released recently a Seeing AI app. It's an app which narrates the world around you. This app has been designed with and for the blind and low vision community. Even today already, Seeing AI can assist with daily tasks from reading to describing photos to identifying products and more. Or, for example, Microsoft Copilot, a AI-powered code completion tool, which is an extension for popular integrated development environments like Visual Studio Code. It can play a crucial role in optimizing code for accessibility by providing intelligent suggestions and insights tailored to accessibility best practices. So you can see AI is creating a lot of goodness. So at Microsoft, obviously we think about building and designing those AI systems with accessibility in mind from the start. And this is why we have two principles, which are core principles of Microsoft Responsible AI, which are inclusiveness and fairness. So inclusiveness principle emphasizes empowering everyone and engaging people of all abilities. Because, well, AI as a technology should be accessible and representative of people with different abilities. Microsoft has standards to ensure AI systems are inclusive and adhere to accessibility guidelines, which are set in Microsoft Accessibility Standard. When we think about accessible AI, what are some considerations you can think about? For example, use different modalities. It can be different modalities like voice or text. They can include people with diverse needs. Or think about providing auditory clues when those systems are working and thinking. That will make it easier for blind users to understand what the system is doing and follow along. Think about things which will enable your screen readers to work correctly, like tabbing experience. If we talk about fairness, what is fairness in action? Microsoft Fairness Principle is helping to minimize the potential for stereotyping, for mistreating people from different demographic groups, including marginalized groups. And here you can see an example how that works in practice, where the system is refusing to engage in hateful speech and redirects user towards useful and quality resources. Those are the behaviors we want to instill in our AI systems. With that said, generative AI comes not just with benefits, it can also come with risks which we absolutely need to mitigate to build those generative AI systems safely, responsibly, and inclusively. We also need to keep in mind that these risks may amplify for people with disabilities, way stronger than for the rest of us. The first risk we look of, first of all, is the obviously overall quality of the application. We want to ensure that that application is functioning correctly. It doesn't produce errors or doesn't hallucinate. Like in an example above, in the Seeing AI, just imagine if a description of a scene would be incorrect, if the app would describe an object wrongly or just fabricate something which is not in that scene, or describing an important feature of that object. You can imagine what consequences that can lead to. Or, for example, you also need to think not just about the quality, but also like a malicious user, because, well, they are out there and they may want to make your system behave not in unintended ways. For example, let's think about prompt injection attacks, where an attacker can embed hidden instructions in your data sources for your app. It can be emails, it can be documents, it can even be an image, because, well, yes, today those attacks are no longer text-based, they are now multimodal. So again, speaking about our previous example, Seeing AI, imagine if there is something embedded in that image your camera is pointed at, which directs your AI app to describe the image in a different way. Or imagine if there is a malicious instruction embedded into the document and you're using an AI app to summarize that document. Of course, that can impact pretty much any user, but if you're relying on the AI app and you cannot read that original email, then the consequences, again, can be particularly bad. Of course, we're also thinking about things like traditional harmful content, where AI can generate just hateful speech or something more offensive. And I have a couple of examples of those over here, when you can see that AI is echoing slurs directed at disability people, because it's a probabilistic system and it doesn't really understand what it's saying, or it can treat the disability with pity, which is also an example of an undesirable behavior. There are other examples, like, for example, providing potentially dangerous advice. Like in this example, we can point our camera at something, and if we're relying on the camera to describe that object to us, we can get a very incorrect guidance. So in this example, you can see that the system is trained to not respond to those examples and redirect users to authoritative sources. So you can see that the risks of AI, they are multiple. So how do we think about those risks and managing them at Microsoft? At Microsoft, we are aligning with the National Institute for Standards and Technology AI Risk Management Framework. This framework has 4 components. It's govern, map, measure, and manage. All of those are aiming at reducing generative AI risks and the associated harms. How that works in practice. So let's talk about map and measure. So map and measure is about testing, and testing. Mapping risks is usually a first and very frequently iterative step towards measuring and managing risks associated with AI. When you're thinking about mapping risks, think about identifying your user base and creating tests to ensure that they are reflecting your use cases. And sometimes also put your hacker hat on and think how a malicious user can break that system. Ask yourself questions: how a user can accidentally break that system? And what if someone wants to intentionally abuse it and take advantage of your intended users? Then craft your tests based on those approaches. At Microsoft, we use a red team, which is intentionally trying to break the systems and come up with all sorts of adversarial scenarios. As well, we also use users who are closer to your average user of the system to find out other edge case scenarios or novel cases. So when you have those risks mapped, then you can proceed to scalable measurements. And I think Dr. Sarah Bird spoke about them in the panel session and what tools we're using. I'll just mention them here briefly. So we have Azure AI Foundry evaluations. Those tools cover a variety of generative AI risks, including harmful content, prompt injection, groundedness, and others. So those are systematic measurements which can help you to inform your future mitigations. Pirate is another tool Microsoft has released in the open source. This is an automation framework which enables you to test your AI applications. And that's more than just a prompt generation tool. It changes its tactics based on the responses you get from the system. And you can actually see and test for a variety of risks using Pirate. So we highly recommend to use those. So when you're done with the measurements, you have mapped your risks, you measure them. So what's next? Then, of course, we want to see for the ways to mitigate them. So before I dive into the details, one important thing, when you think about mitigations, think about defense in depth. Think about it like a Swiss cheese. You want to ensure that every layer, even if it has holes, those holes do not overlap. While we worked over the past years on the AI applications, we found that the best is the combination of several layers. Obviously, you start with the model and ensure that you're selecting the right model for your use case. It may be a small language model like FICE, or it can be large language models. Ensure that the modalities you're choosing are the ones you need for a use case scenario. And sometimes you might not need a specific modality, which also can reduce your risk surface. I always recommend to also review very carefully the transparency documentation provided by the model provider. That way you can ensure that you're familiar with the model and its limitations and if there are any risks. Then from model, you move on to the safety system layer, where you can think about protecting your system inputs and outputs. I think Sarah spoke about content safety filters, which is one way to protect your inputs. You can also use allow or block lists. You may want to constrain your inputs to some predefined formats, even to hard-coded prompts to reduce the risk of user prompt injection. You can also ensure that your system is grounded in verified grounding sources that will help you to minimize the risk of third-party prompt injection through untrusted data sources. So the next layer is the system message. This is the message which essentially guides your agent or chatbot, what it can do and what it cannot. You can include here all sorts of safety components. For example, you can guide it how to talk with people with disabilities. You can ensure that it's inclusive and representative of those people and doesn't use some demeaning or stereotyping language. Microsoft published resources with recommended frameworks and examples for writing those system messages, and they can help significantly to improve quality of your output, accuracy of the app, and harms. Another tool Microsoft just recently published in the open source is called Prompt Packs. This is a tool which allows you to experiment with the system message. And essentially, it can help you to automatically generate tests and test how your system message will work with your app. So there you can take that tool and play with it and see how it works better for your app. And then last but not the least layer here is the user experience layer. So here you will want to think about how to create a generative AI system which is accessible, which is transparent to the user, that the user can understand that they are interacting with AI, and ensure that for people with disabilities, that UI will actually work. So then I think the last one I wanted to leave you with is a couple of lessons learned, just to summarize what I said. So remember, again, testing your generative AI applications is super important. Ensure that that testing is inclusive of people, of your users with different demographics, with different abilities. Work on manual test creation. Create those use test cases which reflect the scenarios you will have for your app. Then do some scalable automated testing, because again, you want to ensure that the results of your tests are statistically significant. Ensure that your mitigations are combination of mitigations of different layers across the platform and the application. ensure that your users know what they are interacting with, that they are aware that that's AI and that AI is helping them to follow along with its workings. And while you're doing all that, obviously keep in mind that your users have different abilities. Ensure people with disabilities in all stages of product development, because they can provide you fantastic guidance on how to actually design those apps to work for them as well, and ensure that they are not excluded from that.
Olga, that is such a great point about co-creation and the importance of having people with disability engage in the full product lifecycle as opposed to, let's say, just at testing, because by the time we get to testing, it might be a little bit too late. Thank you. There's so much I took from there. And speaking of people who are innovating, true, your organization, AvePoint, really specializes in ensuring robust data practices, which when you pair data with AI systems, it becomes even more important, right? The data part becomes critical. So as a data magician and innovator, can you tell us more about the learnings that you have had when developing ChatGPT, which is an internal resource built with Copilot Studio?
True Sandoval.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, like many technological trends, generative AI is evolving rapidly. And from a company perspective, where, many are racing to keep up with it. And I think the first thing to start with is not just keeping up with it, but it's really about implementing AI in a way that actually solves problems and delivers values for employees. I think technology is really only as good as the people it benefits. And when we're building something that we want to roll out to our entire company to help them as an employee at AvePoint, keeping that sort of as our grounding goal, kind of led us through our journey with building this generative AI solution for employees at AvePoint. So I'm going to walk through our best practices, what we learned, and some of the key lessons that really helped us not just build this and publish it to our company, but also iterate and make it better and really incorporate the usage back into how we develop and design these systems. So to start, I think, like Olga mentioned before, generative AI has a lot of potential. And I think we're really at the point where we're starting to see how we can unlock some of that. I think starting from looking at operational tasks to free up time to focus on more meaningful work, having generative AI to help you, write your emails, review your documents, or even as a sounding board, I think is really a great starting point for how to leverage generative AI in the workplace. But at the same time, given all of these great capabilities, there's also a lot of risk to consider, especially in a corporate environment where this is something, if we're rolling it out to a company, this is something that represents the company. And so at AvePoint, we want to make sure that, even though we're providing this tool, it's giving the best information and not leading to more inefficiencies in terms of people are using their time or taking time out of their workday to use this. If the output is not good, then they essentially just wasted their time, and it builds distrust between the tech and the user. And so that's something we definitely want to ameliorate. And ironically, it's kind of a true love story, because at AvePoint, we've been doing data management and data governance for the last 20 years. And so it's really like, oh, we know how to do this. This is our story. And so really putting that, taking that lesson internally and building this helped us kind of see the value that we're not just creating for our customers, but also creating for our internal employees. And so when choosing a use case for thinking about generative AI for employee experience, I think going back to maintaining the tone of your company, and that this is something that's going to be representative of your company, the products, the policies, the processes. And so really having that good grounding data is a huge key in making sure that these outputs are valuable or accurate to the person that's using it. And so looking at what are our what documentation that we have, because we already had a lot of documentation about what products we have, how they're used, people's benefits that they have as employees at AvePoint. So making sure that they're coming from, one, we're identifying helpful documentation. They're coming from authoritative sources, and these documentation that already exists has gone through, rounds of review and things like that from our amazing comms team. And so something to consider is that if you just point a generative AI tool at, a library, sometimes there's kind of like my closet where if you haven't gone into it for a while, there's a lot of mess and there's a lot of things that might be outdated or that we need to get rid of. And even maybe something that, we shouldn't have in there in the first place. So making sure that, good data hygiene and having that good source is really going to set yourself up for a good foundation for using or getting the most value out of these technologies. I think next is also, not designing or developing in a silo. We created this tool with the goal of helping employees at AppPoint. And so we constantly, tested with small groups, took their feedback and really incorporated that into the design and build process that we're continuously iterating on. I think keeping that goal in mind of like, okay, this is supposed to help our employees. That's where we really designed multiple personas, because we understood that we had a variety of different helpful documentation, but we wanted to shape that helpful documentation with different personas to really get the most out of that source documentation and fulfill different use cases. And so if you're thinking about, if I'm an employee trying to understand the benefits that AppPoint provides me, making sure that, the answers that they're getting from that are accurate and helpful. I actually used it recently because I got kicked out of my mom's insurance plan, and I was like, oh no, I missed open enrollment. I'm gonna not have insurance. And I quickly just asked our people assistant, is it still possible for me to sign up? And our policy states if you have a life qualifying event and that's included, then I could still sign up. And so instead of stressing about it for the next week, 2 weeks, and worrying about not having, health insurance, I was able to easily get an answer and also, use the benefits that AppPoint is here to provide employees like that. So at AppPoint, I mentioned we're a leader in the data management and data governance space, enabling a solid foundation for AI in the workplace and ensuring also a structured document lifecycle. I think in corporations, we see the document creation, data is getting created at an insane rate right now. And so making sure that there's a proper life cycle to manage, archive, or obsolete data and removing that. And so your generative AI tools that sit on top of that aren't learning from misinformation or outdated information. So our approach to building Chat AVPT was using Copilot Studio and Azure AI Search. Like I mentioned, I think grounding is really the key and to reduce hallucinations and also provides more control over the answers that are based on. And like I mentioned, requiring, good document lifecycle management. And that's sort of the unsexy part of generative AI solutions, and that, making sure you have a good base layer. And it really enables you for all of the amazing, great capabilities that generative AI provides on top of that. And so we also incorporated, like I mentioned, different system messages in the various personas of the assistants we have. And so in this system message is meant to influence how users are interacting with the solution. And so we have, one specific for knowing our product documentation to help our sellers and to pitch our story better. One for our HR documentation. And so, like I mentioned, people understanding the benefits and the value they get as AppPoint employees. And those are more like persona specific ones, but then also incorporating safety system messages into all of them to make sure all of these personas are behaving in a manner that's safe, respectful, and representative of not just our company values, but respectful values we should have as humans in general. And so our strategy kind of going back is, better document lifecycle management, having a cleaner search index, you're gonna end up with better results. Enriching knowledge with metadata really helped to define the sorts of documentation that we're grounding these personas with. And so if you take different types of documentation, maybe one is a very technical user guide that uses that's more product focused or using more technical knowledge, where another is our communication or our benefits policies. And so classifying the information also helps in that grounding foundation layer. So let's take some time to look at this in action. And when we were deploying Chat ABPT, which we built on Copilot Studio, we deployed it to teams, which was a great way to make it accessible to all of our employees. A lot of people work in teams, so we figured let's give them a tool, a generative AI solution that is in where they work.
On a screen.
As a neurodivergent individual, I often struggle with organizing my thoughts or getting the most out of my meetings, especially with my one-on-ones with my manager. So here I'm asking our mentor assistant, the full name is Mentor Centaur. We also came up with cool names for each of those to make them a little bit more human-like, how I can better structure my one-on-ones. Giving extra context around what I'm trying to get advice on. So saying like I'm having problems staying on topic, as there are a lot of things that I'm trying to cover in a short meeting, and giving additional context. Tool understands what advice would be most relevant to me. And so here you see some of our system message in action, where it provides a response that is both helpful and clear, giving me direct things that I can do to make these meetings more valuable. We also included in the system message to probe deeper, because perhaps if an employee is using this mentor assistance, they're trying to get guidance. And so we don't just want it to be a Q&A, and we really want it to be a involved engagement. So I mentioned that I currently write my notes in a notebook, and that I want to discuss things that I often run out of time to do. Keeping the language positive and clear is really key from the build process, making sure that the assistants are behaving in the most human-like way that an AI can, while still maintaining, some of the underlying capabilities.
That is fantastic. I found myself nodding so much around the examples. I'm neurodiverse as well, I'm dyslexic, but there's a lot of similarities in terms of the tips I'm going to take from this from your presentation and how I can prepare for my one-to-one. So thank you for that, Drew. And also, it's fantastic to see how your organization truly is experimenting and creating tools that are adapted to the needs of your employees. And ultimately, that is also helping them access information easier and upskilling. Talking about upskilling, Keely, your organization Making Space is all about creating better pathways to employment and career advancement for people with disabilities. We know that according to statistics, around 40% of companies worldwide are actively using AI in their operations and in their businesses. So upskilling for people with disabilities is not only an equalizer from an access perspective, but it really becomes a differentiator as well. So how can we think deeper about this space?
Keely Cat Wells.
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly exciting. And just to kind of start with my own personal journey into this space. So roughly 10 years ago, I received life-changing news that I would undergo a surgery that would finally reduce my reliance on hospital. And this came after about 4 years of misdiagnosis, medical malpractice, and not being believed, as well as countless prior surgeries that resulted in life-altering complications. I really had no idea how much my life would change when I began rebuilding it. I was unable to return to college, and later I ended up losing a job due to disability discrimination. I came to realize that my struggles were not unique. They were part of a much, much larger systemic issue, and really a reality faced by so many countless disabled people navigating a world that was not designed with us in mind. So these experiences led me to create a talent agency where we placed hundreds of disabled professionals in some of the world's most poignant media projects. But the demand for support from disabled professionals across sectors kept growing. And this was also driven by employers' needs for more innovative, creative, and forward-thinking talent. Plus, the unemployment rate for disabled people in 2023 stood at 7.2%, double that of non-disabled people. So to close this gap, we founded Making Space, a platform dedicated to providing the resources and opportunities disabled people need to really build meaningful careers. And we also champion the non-traditional employment paths, which was something that I was told that would hold me back when I first became disabled. So we've created free, disabled-led, accessible, and industry-relevant courses, including a course on AI prompt engineering to help disabled professionals get ahead and break into high-demand roles. As more companies harness the power of AI tools like Microsoft's Copilot, we need to ensure two things. First, that these tools are accessible and equitable for disabled professionals. And second, that people actually know how to use them effectively. Because even the best technology is useless if people don't have the skills to be able to leverage it. AI has the potential to revolutionize how we work. It can help with task automation, like we've heard previously today, support with decision-making, improve hiring practices. But if these tools are not designed with accessibility in mind, they will continue to reinforce existing biases, further marginalizing disabled professionals instead of creating more equitable opportunities. So before we jump into solutions, here are some examples of AI exclusion risks. AI screening tools sometimes filter out applicants based on employment gaps, and this disproportionately harms disabled people who may have taken medical leave, needed flexible work arrangements, or faced systemic employment barriers. Instead of assessing skills and potential, these tools can perpetuate discrimination by equating uninterrupted work histories with competence. Additionally, many AI-driven platforms do not integrate with screen readers, voice recognition software, or assistive technologies, creating significant barriers for blind and low vision candidates and employees, as well as those with mobility impairments or dexterity limitations. If AI-driven workflows require inaccessible interfaces, they exclude a wide range of talented people. AI-driven productivity and performance tracking tools also often fail to account for different work styles, energy levels, accommodation needs. So for example, a disabled employee who has periodic flare-ups from a chronic illness like myself may need to pace their workload differently or work asynchronously. AI models that assess productivity solely based on keystrokes, time logged in, or rigid deadlines penalize employees for needing flexibility rather than recognizing the true value of their contributions. So with all of that said, AI must be a tool for inclusion, not another gatekeeper. AI is not inherently biased, but the data and the frameworks it is built on often reflect human biases. If we fail to design AI systems with inclusion at the forefront, they will only automate discrimination rather than dismantle it. AI can transform the workforce for the better, but only if we actively design to do so. So instead of replacing old barriers with new ones and digital ways, AI should be used to expand access, recognize potential, and truly create equitable opportunities. We believe this is more than possible, and AI can be an incredible tool for accessibility when done right. So here are some examples of how AI can support disabled professionals. First and foremost, AI can make sense of data. This is especially beneficial and useful for blind users. So imagine a data scientist who is blind. Typically, complex graphs and visual data are a challenge. But with the right AI prompt, a tool like Microsoft Copilot can describe graphs in detail, making insights much more accessible. AI can also support neurodivergent professionals. For many neurodivergent workers, unclear instructions can be overwhelming. AI can break down complex tasks into step-by-step structured instructions tailored to those individuals' needs, improving productivity and reducing stress. AI can also reframe workplace accommodation requests. Many employees struggle with how to ask for workplace accommodations. AI can help generate professional, clear, and effective accommodation requests, making it much easier for self-advocacy and getting what you need to be productive in the workplace. So getting the most out of AI comes down to how we prompt it. The clearer and more intentional we are, the better results we get, especially when it comes to accessibility. Whether it's a simple question, providing context, refining responses, or guiding AI through a thought process, these techniques can help make AI work for us and not the other way around. So let's break a few of them down. Simple prompts like asking direct questions or giving clear commands to AI. An example would be, how many people with disabilities are there in the world? Then there is context prompting. This provides background information or context before asking the main question and helping the model understand the scenario better. An example would be, I am blind, I cannot see this chart, extract the main information for me and tell me what it's about. And then iteration. This involves refining and improving prompts based on previous responses to achieve the desired output. It's important to remember it's very common not to get the perfect answer on the first try and have to iterate. So an example would be, summarize this document for me, and then a refined prompt could be, I'm dyslexic, the summarization is still too long and it includes complex vocabulary. Explain this in plain language using shorter sentences. Then there's chain of thought prompting. This technique involves guiding the model through a logical sequence of steps to arrive at the answer and has shown to have great results. So an example would be, I'm hard of hearing, I need help understanding this video. Can you summarize it for me? First, identify the main topic, then break down the key points, and finally, provide important takeaways. So here are a few practical AI prompts based on those previous examples that can help bridge the accessibility gap. So there's, summarize this graph into a concise written description that a blind person can understand. Break down this large project into a step-by-step structured to-do list with clear priorities and estimate time per task. Write a professional email requesting a flexible work schedule due to chronic illness. Make it clear, concise, and solution-focused. Rewrite my resume, summarizing and emphasizing my transferable skills while addressing employment gaps in a positive way. These are small ways that AI can improve accessibility and workplace inclusion. At Making Space, we are using AI to turn the lived experience of disability into marketable, job-relevant skills, bridging the gap between non-traditional experience and career opportunities, and also turning what has been historically seen as a weakness into a competitive advantage. AI is becoming a required skill in almost every industry. 71% of employers would rather hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills than a more experienced candidate without them. AI-related jobs have a 25% wage premium in some markets. The unemployment rate for disabled professionals also remains twice as high as that for non-disabled workers. So, if we want to ensure that disabled people have real, sustainable careers, we must focus on accessible AI upskilling. We need to access the right jobs with the right growth, security, and future relevance. And AI presents an incredible opportunity to get ahead and change employment outcomes for disabled professionals. And that is why we collaborated with Microsoft to create a free upskilling course on AI prompt engineering for disabled people to learn to master AI tools on things like AI Copilot, ChatGPT, and boosting productivity and employability. These courses are bite-sized, they're self-paced, they're 100% free, they're also accessible, and they also have ASL interpretation, screen reader friendly, and other accessibility features, and they're also available globally. These courses were designed by industry experts, and they're also disabled-led, because who better to teach accessibility than us? AI and automation are changing the world of work, and we must ensure that AI tools are built with accessibility at their core and by disabled people, and that disabled professionals have access to upskilling opportunities. Employers must actively remove attitudinal and systemic barriers. So, employers, ensure your AI-driven hiring and workplace tools are accessible. To disabled professionals, enroll in free AI courses to future-proof your skills. You can learn more about the one that we created at making-space.com. And to advocates and leaders, keep pushing for disabled people to be in decision-making roles and push for inclusive AI and hiring practices. We have the power to reshape the future of work, and it's incredibly exciting. So let's make sure it includes everyone.
Those were fantastic tips for prompting, but also such fantastic overview of what we should be considering as technology makers, as technology users, and everything in between. I know that in my case, I found myself nodding a lot in terms of the examples you were giving, especially about summarization and how these tools really can change our experiences and can change how we are in the workplace as well. So I know that I'm taking lessons with me. One, I'm going to go to Making Space and making sure that I'm taking the full prompting course today. I'm going to make sure that when I'm building AI systems, my Swiss cheese holes don't overlap, and there's always something we consider in between to make sure that we have a safe and mitigated product. And also, I'm going to consider my data like I consider my closet. What shouldn't have been in there to begin with? What do we need to take out, and what needs a refresh? So we hope that this session inspired new ideas. We hope that you are excited to either get started in building technology or upskilling and considering how you can grow your AI skills. So thank you and enjoy the rest of Ability Summit.
A URL from this session, aka.ms/AI safety messages. In animation, colorful undulating bands frame the words, "Thank you for participating, and there's more to explore." Discover other resources in the top navigation bar.